Je declare la réunion.
Good morning, everyone. I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 45 of the Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage. I would like you to note that this meeting is taking place on the traditional unceded territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin peoples.
Adopted by this committee on Tuesday, September the 20th, 2022, the committee is meeting on the study of safe sport in Canada. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to a House of Commons order on Thursday, June the 23rd, 2022. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. I would like to make a few comments for the benefits of the witnesses and members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating in video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you're not speaking. Interpretation for those on Zoom, you have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either Floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you know how you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. In accordance with our routine motion, I'm informing the committee that all witnesses have completed the required connection tests in advance of the meeting. Now, before we begin, there are two items I wish to discuss with the members of this committee. Will the committee consent that Mr. Skinner and Mr. Andrew Winton and Mr. Brenda Moore, Mr. Philip Underwood, that Mr. Skinner and Mr. Philip Underwood be assisted by these counsel, and that Andrea Skinner and Michael Brenda Moore be permitted to be assisted by their respective counsel when they appear in relation to the study on safe sport in Canada. Is the committee in agreement with this?
Madam Chair?
John?
I just want to point out an observation that the law firm is Hockey Canada's law firm, and Mr. Brenda Moore is appearing here as an individual. And I just want to be reassured that there will be no undue influence or intimidation of Mr. Brenda Moore's testimony by a law firm that is engaged by Hockey Canada and not him as an individual.
Thank you, John, and I think that was very clear, so I'm hoping that the council and Mr. Brenda Moore be aware of the condition put by the committee that there be no undue influence by a law firm on Mr. Brenda Moore. Now, there are some documents that we have to deal with. There are minutes that were received from Hockey Canada yesterday evening, and we were not able, because there was a large number of pages, we were not able to get them translated in time, but it'll be distributed to the committee members when the translation occurs. And I'm afraid these are one of the problems that we have to deal with when we only get things at the last minute. It's pretty difficult to get them translated, and the clerk cannot distribute to the committee unless it's in both official languages. So please remember this, or if you can, send them in both official languages. Thank you very much for that. Now, I would like to welcome our witnesses, but before we do, I have to ask the witnesses to swear in. And I would like to ask you if you prefer religious oath or solemn affirmation. And I will begin with Mr. Michael Brenda Moore. Would you like a religious oath or a solemn affirmation, Mr. Brenda Moore?
Bonjour, Madame la Présidente.
Good day, Madam Chair. I would prefer a solemn affirmation, please.
All right. So I will read the oath, and you will answer, and you will actually just respond. So, in solemn affirmation. So you will repeat after me. I, Michael Brenda Moore, do solemnly, sincerely, and truly affirm and declare the taking of any oath is according to my religious belief unlawful. I do also solemnly, sincerely, and truly affirm and declare that the evidence I shall give on this examination shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So shall you...
J'affirme solennellement, Madame la Présidente.
I solemnly swear, Madam Chair, that I will tell the truth.
And now I go to Ms. Skinner. Ms. Skinner, would you like a solemn affirmation or would you like a religious oath?
Good morning. A solemn affirmation, please.
Thank you. Now, I will repeat, I will state your name. I, Andrea Skinner, do solemnly, sincerely, and truly affirm and declare the taking of any oath is according to my religious belief unlawful. I do also solemnly, sincerely, and truly affirm and declare that the evidence I shall give on this examination shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I so affirm and declare.
Thank you very much, Ms. Skinner. And so now we will begin. As individuals, you will each have 5 minutes. And so, and then at the end of your time, we will then have a question and answer period from the committee. But I would like to give you a 30-second notice when you do your 5-minute round. So beginning again with Mr. Michael Bundamour. Will you begin, please, for 5 minutes? Thank you. Amy, do you have a...
Je m'excuse.
Begging your pardon.
Vous m'entendez?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, members of the public, players and parents. I recognize that this committee, and indeed all Canadians, have serious questions about Hockey Canada's handling of a sexual assault allegation in 2018, as well as the organization's ongoing efforts to improve safety in and around the game. I hope my testimony today will help provide additional answers on these questions. As you know, I was chair of Hockey Canada's Board of Directors from November 2018 until I stepped down last August. Like many Canadians, I have spent much of my life in and around the sport of hockey. I have been a volunteer in the sport for over 30 years, particularly being involved with minor field hockey associations. I am a father and grandfather with 2 grandsons who play minor field hockey. And like the members of this committee, I am committed to ensuring that all Canadians can enjoy a safe national sport. During my tenure as chair, we worked hard to bring forward new ideas and perspectives with a focus on inclusion, including the advancement of women's sport and sports safety. While I am proud of this work, I know there is still much to do for Hockey Canada and much work that should have been accomplished earlier. That is why 2 months ago I made the decision to step down from my role at Hockey Canada so that the new leadership could take immediate steps that were necessary to address the significant challenges facing Hockey Canada and our sport as a whole. At the same time, I recognize that this committee has questions about certain decisions that were made during my tenure as president, including those surrounding the 2018 sexual assault allegations, including Canada's national junior team. I strongly believe that Hockey Canada took appropriate action by reporting this incident to the police, Sport Canada, and by launching an independent investigation. I understand the frustration of Canadians with the suspension of the investigation in 2020, and the case has recently resumed. And I want to reiterate that I was never made aware of the identity of the individuals involved. I hope that the recent changes made by Hockey Canada, including the reopening of the investigation and the mandatory involvement of the players, will help provide the answers that so many Canadians are looking for.
Je vais aussi parler de...
I also want to discuss the board's decision earlier this year to authorize a settlement with the young woman at the center of these allegations. While this decision was widely criticized, the board made this decision because it felt it would be inappropriate to victimize the young woman in court. I would like to conclude by noting that under new leadership and with a comprehensive action plan in place, I believe Hockey Canada is making real progress in improving the Canadian game for all participants. Thank you. And I will be pleased to answer your questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
And I now go to Ms. Skinner for 5 minutes, please, Ms. Skinner.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and bonjour.
Good day.
The opportunity to appear today. Like many Canadians, sport has been very important to me throughout my life. Growing up, I was a competitive swimmer and played soccer and hockey at the elite level. I was captain of the Cornell University women's hockey team, assistant coach for the University of Ottawa varsity women's team, and I have refereed at the highest levels in women's hockey. I'm a partner at a Toronto-based law firm where I lead our firm's mental health initiative and chair our diversity and inclusion program, which was recently internationally recognized. Community service has always been a high priority for me. I've served as a mentor to girls' minor hockey associations, founded and directed a running and reading program for disadvantaged children in Ottawa, and served as a board member of Hockey Helps the Homeless. I ran for election to the Board of Hockey Canada in November 2020. It was a way for me to give back to the sport. From the beginning, a primary objective of mine was to make the sport more accessible, safe, inclusive, and welcoming to existing and new participants. Our board shares this perspective. There's been a lot of talk about toxic culture in hockey and a culture of silence. These behaviors are contrary to the fundamental values of respect, safety, fair play, and authenticity. They include bullying, disrespectful or demeaning language, harassment, sexism, racism, and sexual abuse or assault. While hundreds of thousands of participants across the country have never experienced such unacceptable behavior in hockey, unquestionably it does exist. Any instance of this behavior in hockey should not be tolerated. Regrettably, toxic behavior exists throughout society. No segment of society is immune. Culpable behavior such as sexual assault, whether in our educational systems, in the business environment, in the political sphere, in our religious institutions, is evil and reprehensible. Suggesting that toxic behavior is somehow a specific hockey problem or to scapegoat hockey as a centerpiece for toxic culture is, in my opinion, counterproductive to finding solutions and risks overlooking the change that needs to be made more broadly to prevent and address toxic behavior, particularly against women. When these issues arise, we must do our absolute best to deal with them in the most humane, sensitive, and responsible way possible. My perspective on the settlement of the lawsuit involving allegations of sexual assault in London in 2018 is that as a board, we wanted to do what we viewed as being responsible and respectful, particularly regarding the wishes of the young woman involved. When the statement of claim was filed earlier this year, we handled it based on the information we had at the time and based on professional advice. Our instinct was one of compassion for the young woman and a sincere desire to respect her wishes and perspectives. We were keenly aware of the alternative to settling, that legal proceedings in these types of situations can re-victimize people in a very traumatic way. I personally did not want to see the young woman subjected to the cruelty and the invasiveness of an adversarial court process involving cross-examination and harsh defense tactics. Our board does not share the view that Hockey Canada should be making more leadership changes at this time. As a board, we continue to support the CEO and management. We believe it's in the best interests of Hockey Canada and for all its participants that the organization's leadership remain stable. All 9 positions of the board of directors are up for election later this year. We are in the midst of a governance review by a former Supreme Court of Canada justice that is examining the structure and composition of the board and senior management. The board believes that Hockey Canada CEO and his executive team have the skills and ability to lead Hockey Canada, including through the execution of our action plan, on which we've already made good progress, and the other items in our strategic plan. Like any group in our society, Hockey Canada has much to do to make hockey better, to do all that it can to eliminate toxic behavior, to make our game more inclusive, mindful of the importance of diversity, respect, and opportunity for all. We are actively promoting and accelerating positive change in the culture of hockey. We have and are continuing to establish additional safeguards and better reporting and handling of maltreatment complaints. Across the country, our leaders at the provincial, regional, and territorial level are actively participating in efforts to track incidents of maltreatment and in reviewing and enhancing education and training of players, coaches, officials, parents, and volunteers to help address these issues. All of us involved in hockey play a part in eradicating unacceptable behavior from the game. All of us must be empowered and encouraged to speak up and call out bad behavior whenever and wherever it occurs. Thank you again for inviting me here today. I look forward to responding to your questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Skinner. And now we go to the question and answer segment. And this is going to be a 6-minute round. And I will begin with John Nader for the Conservatives. John, 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for joining us this morning. I want to begin with a brief comment. When Hockey Canada appeared before us in July, I left that meeting with a small glimmer of hope that perhaps Hockey Canada had got the message, that we would see meaningful change. And then within weeks of that meeting, we see Hockey Canada go out and hire Navigator, crisis communication firm. We see this asinine survey sent out that diminishes the culpability of Hockey Canada. We hear today that there's a need for stable leadership within the leadership of Hockey Canada. And then what really got me is that 1 week after that meeting, Hockey Canada's board met, and this was what was included in the minutes. It said, it was encouraged to get the message into the public, get ahead of the communication, and shift the narrative. The National Equity Fund is in place to protect children in our programs and to take care of any victims. Settlement payments must be viewed in a positive manner, not a negative manner. Repetition required to state the narrative. Madam Chair, I find this deeply troubling that the organization is more concerned about shifting the narrative than actually meaningfully implementing change within this organization. So I offer that as a comment at the outset. My first question is to Mr. Brindamore. We understand that in Saturday, May 7th of 2022, the Hockey Canada board met in camera for 2 hours and 3 minutes to discuss the settlement of the London incident. I would like to know what was stated, or what information was provided to the board from Mr. Smith to make that settlement, and exactly what did the board approve? What was the approval that was given by the board to the leadership of Hockey Canada?
Madame la Présidente,
Madam Chair, thank you to the member for his question. I believe you were talking about May 19th. That was the date when the Board of Directors approved the settlement of the situation. So on May 19th, a board meeting was called. At that time, our board team provided us the necessary information and provided us information from our legal team. According to our legal advisors, there were 2 options. Number 1, to go into legal proceedings, or number 2, to settle the matter. Of course, the board discussed this, and at the end of the discussions, the Board of Directors authorized an out-of-court settlement, which was mutually agreeable for both parties, if possible. After this, the case moved forward, and the public knows what happened.
Thank you for that. Over the summer, shortly before your resignation as board chair, it was speculated in the media that you had either formally or informally encouraged the board of directors to terminate the contract of Mr. Scott Smith as CEO. Can you confirm or deny that you did in fact encourage Mr. Smith to either resign or be terminated?
Madame la Présidente,
Madam Chair, thank you again to the member for your question. It was perfectly responsible for the Board of Directors, given the situation, to take a stance or to discuss the situation with the leader of our board. This is what we did. And at the end of the discussions, the board decided to put our full trust in Mr. Smith. There was no motion. There was no vote. There was simply a discussion, and it was very normal to do so.
Then do you personally have faith in Mr. Scott Smith to lead this organization?
Monsieur Smith a beaucoup
Mr. Smith has significant talent and skill. It's up to the current board to determine the answer to your question.
With respect, you didn't answer the question. Do you personally have faith in Mr. Scott Smith to be the CEO of this organization?
mes croyances personnelles
My personal beliefs have absolutely no holding on the situation. I believe that the board of directors has all necessary tools to be able to make the appropriate evaluation.
I think that answer is telling. Ms. Skinner, my question to you is, who approved hiring Navigator and how much was allocated in expenses for Navigator?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am not certain what the answer is to that question. Operations would know if there was an amount specifically allocated to Navigator. I can say though that what we have heard is that there is a call for a new perspective, and so Hockey Canada has secured outside perspective, and Navigator is one of those perspectives.
But
we're taking steps to change how we communicate.
But who approved hiring Navigator? Was it the board or was it the management?
I believe that was a decision of operations.
Thank you very much. Nader, you've gone a little over. You're setting the standard for the Nader formula again. But so I now go to for the Liberals, Mr. Housefather, for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. To follow up Mr. Nader's question, Mr. Brindamour, à la réunion où
Mr. Brindamour, at the meeting where the board of directors discussed Mr. Smith, were you against that in the discussions? Madam Chair, I thank the member for his question. The board of directors held the discussion, and each member was able to put forth their opinion. Mr. Brindamour, were you against his remaining CEO in the conversation, yes or no? The board of directors arrived at a consensus to approve, to give Hockey Canada. Thank you, Mr. Brindamour.
I want to come to you now because tone at the top is really important, and you're the new tone at the top. And one of the things at tone at the top is it's important not to be tone deaf. The women's hockey team, our women's national team, made a statement on July 26, 2022 that was quite scathing about the administration of Hockey Canada. Then the World Championships happened, and the women's team honored our country by winning the gold medal. And yet, who was presenting the gold medal? Scott Smith. Ms. Skinner, did the women's hockey team request Mr. Smith to present them the gold medal?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. The women's hockey team, I don't believe that was their request. I believe it was a request from a woman who is a leader of a staff leader, a leader of the women's hockey program. And ordinarily, if a volunteer board of director was in attendance for that event, then they would have been presenting the medals. But unfortunately, it wasn't possible for a volunteer board of director to be there, and so Mr. Smith did that in our place.
Possible for any of the 9 members of the board to be there at the Women's World Hockey Championship. We'll check into whether anybody was there. Thank you. I want to come into the Participants Legacy Trust Fund that we found out about it in the Globe and Mail article yesterday that deals with personal injury claims triggered by actions between 1986 and 1995. Why did Hockey Canada not tell us about this fund when it appeared on the 2 previous occasions before the committee, Ms. Skinner?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. The Participants Legacy Trust Fund is not a Hockey Canada asset, and that is why it wasn't mentioned, and it doesn't show up on Hockey Canada's financials. It's not an asset of Hockey Canada. And to be clear, I think that fund has been fundamentally misdescribed in the media, and that's very unfortunate. No funds from that trust have been used to settle claims.
Okay, so we're gonna get into that in a second. Before I do, can you tell me now, are there any other funds other than the ones we now know about that have now been disclosed used to settle claims at Hockey Canada or any member of Hockey Canada?
I can tell you the answer to that question from my perspective based on my knowledge. There are four main elements to Hockey Canada's financials. We have an operating fund, we have a health benefits trust fund, we have the National Equity Fund, which people have heard a lot about, and we have a series of pillars, which include a growth fund, a facilities fund, a branch support fund, an insurance rate stabilization fund, international event hosting fund, and a technology fund. Those funds all have prescribed purposes or objectives. And
Is the answer then no, that you don't have another fund?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Is the answer
I've just described for you.
Yeah, is the answer then no, that you do not have another fund that you use to fund these type of claims related to sexual liability or sexual assault?
Well, I'm not sure I agree with the premise of the question, but I don't believe that there is.
Okay. So now I'm going to turn my attention to three things in the August 2nd minutes that I think are interesting. One, there was discussion about false information being circulated in and by the press. Discussion on communication strategy ensued. Then, we are a family and need to push back hard, need to start defending and stop sitting in the neutral zone. So basically, Hockey Canada is taking a Trump-like view and saying that the press is responsible for its woes. And yesterday, you guys issued a statement, and that I want to come to. It is inaccurate to report that the Participants Legacy Trust Fund was used to settle sexual assault claims, and any suggestion otherwise is false. Okay, it sounds really like it's horrible that anybody could have thought that. Then why in 2019, in the affidavit that was filed by Brian Cairo, your employee, did it say in paragraph 5, the trust was established to fund claims made against the Canadian Hockey Association for matters including but not limited to sexual abuse? Is sexual abuse not sexual assault? Ms. Skinner?
Yes, sorry, sexual abuse and sexual assault for me are essentially the same thing, but could you repeat the question?
In paragraph 5 of Brian Cairo's affidavit, when he tried to prolong the trust, when Hockey Canada was successful in prolonging the trust, he stated the trust was established to fund claims made against the Canadian Hockey Association for matters including but not limited to sexual abuse. It would seem to me then that sexual abuse and sexual assault were potential claims that could be settled under this fund. But yesterday's statement made it seem like it couldn't be. I also want to point out paragraph 8. Paragraph 8 in Mr. Cairo's affidavit says there are currently unpaid claims. In your statement and in the statement yesterday, it says this trust has never been used for any purpose. So how could there have been unpaid claims in 2019 if the trust has never been used for any purpose?
I have to apologize because I don't have Mr. Cairo's affidavit in front of me, but what I can tell you is that it's inaccurate to say that the Participants Legacy Trust Fund was used to settle sexual assault claims. That trust was established to cover uninsured claims for a period in which Hockey Canada and its members were self-insured between September of 1986 and August 1995. As we know, it can take a very long time for complainants in sexual assault cases to come forward. And so when the trust was extended, in 2020, it was extended for the benefits of the members who had contributed to that. Not Hockey Canada, as I said, is not receiving money under.
Thank
that
you,
trust.
Ms. Skinner. I think we've ended this round, and now I'm going to go to Mr. Lemire from the Bloc Québécois for 6 minutes, please. Mr. Lemire.
Merci.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Skinner, Hockey Canada's senior management appeared before this committee, and the first time I thought they understood why they were before the committee. They understood how outraged parliamentarians felt and that Canadians felt in the face of the scandal and the allegations in 2018 in London. Because it was under pressure, Hockey Canada might have acted, also perhaps because the minister froze the funding, and Hockey Canada perhaps decided to understand the message and act to change the culture. But it is clear to us now that the culture has not changed. What we learned yesterday is that there is another fund within a fund. That means that this cover-up and code of silence culture still exists. Who is responsible at Hockey Canada? I feel that the senior management no longer deserves trust. A deep cultural shift needs to take place at Hockey Canada. Who is currently responsible? Is it the board of directors or is it senior management?
Thank you. Madam Chair, the Board of Directors has oversight for the organization, and that includes senior management. And as I explained in my answer to Mr. Housefather, I believe that the reports that have circulated in the media do not accurately reflect the situation with respect to the participants trust fund. Change is happening, and I can assure this committee, and I can assure the members of the Canadian public that change is happening. I came to this board through an independent nominating process in November of 2020 to help make the sport better, and I took on this role as the interim chair less than 2 months ago. Change is in progress, and we've heard the members of the Canadian public who are asking for change more quickly.
Je trouve ironique que vous dites
I find it ironic that you say that the media misrepresented things, because that is also what was said in the poll that you used to perhaps try and change a public opinion. But there are questions that remain unanswered. I understand that you also took on Judge Cromwell, which was extremely expensive, to put forward recommendations. Are you expecting to have more light shone on situations for you to then take a decision? And does Scott Smith have your full trust to be able to get to the bottom of things? Also, there's an ad sponsored on Facebook where Hockey Canada is asking us to look at all the good things Hockey Canada has done. Can you comment on this?
Thank you, Madam Chair. There was a lot packed in there. I'll respond to the question about support for senior leadership. Our board, frankly, does not share the view that senior leadership should be replaced on the basis of what we consider to be substantial misinformation and unduly cynical attacks. I appreciate that others disagree with us, but our positions are based on the information that we have and an understanding that Hockey Canada has an excellent reputation. I do not fault senior management or the board with respect to the way the 2018 sexual assault incident was handled. I believe the appropriate steps were taken in terms of contacting the police, retaining an independent law firm to investigate the allegations, contacting Sport Canada. I understand there's criticism with respect to senior management, having in place the National Equity Fund. I'm a parent of 2 young kids, but I believe it's a responsible risk management practice. So those appear to be 2 fundamental allegations from critics who are calling for leadership change. In the board's view, we need stability at this time. We have 9 members of the board up for re-election or election later this year. We're waiting on the results of a Supreme Court of Canada governance review, which, while it may be expensive, is one of the most important things that Hockey Canada has done in its 100-year history.
Mais, Madame Skinner,
But Ms. Skinner, the problem with Hockey Canada and the reason why parliamentarians and Canadians no longer trust Hockey Canada is the lack of transparency, the culture of silence. If we can't understand things, it's not necessarily our fault. Perhaps Hockey Canada also is not transparent enough, and it seems that hockey players are above the law. You had the opportunity to look into these funds that were used for settlements. Was Hockey Canada always responsible for paying all settlements given to victims?
I'm not sure I understand that question, but on the issue of transparency, I can say that since I stepped into this role, I agree that we need to be more transparent. I agree that we need to better communicate the things that we've done and the things that we're doing. And that's partly why I stepped into this role. That's why I've been attending town halls across the country, speaking with stakeholders, trying to understand what's important and getting our message out there so that we can be more transparent. That is my goal too.
The time is up, Mr. Lemire, and I go to Peter Julian for the NDP. 6 minutes, please, Peter, with the NADER formula.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks to our witnesses for being here today. There is no doubt that hockey parents across the country want answers from Hockey Canada. They scrimp and save to register their kids in Hockey Canada programs, and the revelations, both the allegations of sexual violence and sexual abuse, and how that is handled within Hockey Canada, but also the complete lack of financial transparency is profoundly disturbing to Canadian hockey parents. It's profoundly disturbing to the Canadian public, and that's why Hockey Canada has really lost the trust of Canadians. And that's why this committee has said in a very clear way that they have lost confidence in the leadership of Hockey Canada. Now, the way to respond to that isn't by pushing back and saying that these are attacks on Hockey Canada. The way to respond to that is by providing answers that the Canadian public is asking. And I would like to see over the course of this hearing answers. And so I'll start with you, Madam Skinner. You just said that the Participants' Legacy Trust Fund is, quote, not an asset of Hockey Canada. And yet we know that it was set up by funds that were transferred from the National Equity Fund. We also know that it was Hockey Canada that went to court to alter the terms of the trust and to renew it until 2039. So, Ms. Skinner, I just want to ask, how can you say there's not an asset when the funds came from Hockey Canada and when it was Hockey Canada that was actually going to court to extend the mandate of that trust?
Thank you for the question. I appreciate the chance to clarify this issue. The trust arises from contributions made by Hockey Canada's members, Hockey BC, Hockey Alberta, Hockey Saskatchewan. All of the members contributed to the trust. Hockey Canada is a trustee of the trust. So the trust belongs to the original contributors of the trust for that self-insured period I mentioned from 1986 to 1995. And so over the years, this trust, has provided annual funding to the members and to the CHL by way of realized annual investment income, and that income is then distributed to the members and the CHL, not Hockey Canada. This money is not Hockey Canada's. It's not Hockey Canada's asset.
Again, I find the answer is not transparent. The reality is Hockey Canada does control the trust, and the monies went from the National Equity Fund to the Participants' Legacy Trust Fund. Can you confirm how much was transferred from the National Equity Fund to the Participants' Legacy Trust Fund?
I'm sorry, sir, but with the greatest of respect, I don't agree with that characterization of the trust. I'm being as transparent as possible. Unfortunately, it's not resonating, but the trust does not belong to Hockey Canada. It exists for the benefit of its members.
How much was transferred from the National Equity Fund?
I believe it was $7.1 million in 1999.
I'll move on to board meetings. I wrote to Scott Smith in August because of information that we obtained through a former board member who's a whistleblower around the cost of board dinners for Hockey Canada. And is it true that many board dinners have cost more than $5,000? Is that something you can confirm? Mr. Smith refused to respond to that question.
Thanks for the question, Madam Chair, through you. I have not experienced that. I can only speak to since I've been on the board in November 2020, and again, I view that as a changed board. I've only attended 2 meetings in person. I've spent hundreds of hours on Hockey Canada board matters. I've only attended two meetings in person, and I think one dinner, was a 1 or 2 plate meal. We have a code of conduct that's in place. as I said, I've spent hundreds of hours as a volunteer trying to improve the game of hockey.
Thank you. I don't have a lot of time, so I'll move on to the next question. For rings, championship rings, can you confirm the cost of those rings to members of the board are over $3,000 each?
I have no knowledge of that, sir.
Monsieur Brind'Amour,
Mr. Brandamour, could you please answer the same question? First, the question on dinners. Have you attended a meeting with a dinner for the board of directors that cost over $5,000? And can you confirm the price of rings that are given to the board members?
Madame la Présidente,
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you to the member for his question. Regarding the dinners of that sort that you are referring to, if that did take place, it must have happened during special events with more people attending than just board members. I don't remember it happening, but if it did happen, it must have been in a context where there was a special event to honor.
okay.
And for the rings, I believe that your numbers are correct. And I believe this is a situation that arises when our national teams have the good fortune to be able to win a world championship. So those are limited occasions. So every time, $3,000 for each ring multiplied by the number of board members, that's expensive.
Thank you. And now I will move to the second round, which is a 5-minute round. And I begin with, for the Conservatives, Kevin Moore. Kevin, 5 minutes, please. No NATO formula attachment here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Brind'Amour, we're disappointed in your leadership with Hockey Canada. You came on in November of 2018. You were re-elected board chair in November 2020. And then when it gets a little hot, you decide to leave on August the 5th. You're part of the problem as much as Tom Rennie and Scott Smith. Your leadership at the board table is in dire strait right now. We're desperately waiting for Thomas Cromwell's report because I feel the board has not done its due diligence from day one, and you're part of the problem. So when you went into your final board meeting in August and decided to pull the pin, was it because your board, the 8 members surrounding you, had no confidence in you? Would you please respond to that?
merci Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you to the member for your question. The answer is no, I do not believe so.
Just surprised here, there's no need to wait for a new era. Well, then all 9 board members should resign immediately in August. You were the board chair. I think all 9 should have resigned August the 5th. You pulled the pin early, 3 months early, because you're up for re-election November of 2022. So by you leading the board, pulling the pin early, I would suspect that all 8 others should have pulled the pin with you. Your response to that?
Merci Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the member for your question. Yes, I do not share the characterization in your question. We put significant work into culture change. We invested substantially in decreasing harassment, maltreatment, etc. We had much work to do. I would like to highlight that. And we also made efforts towards inclusion. So I disagree with your characterization. Now, regarding the question, it is up to each board member to take a decision for himself.
I know it's comprised of volunteers, but as the chair, did you have, on the 2018 sexual assault allegations, did you as board chair have one-on-one conversations with Tom Rennie and Scott Smith about the allegations?
Merci Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the member for your question. I was not the board chair when the 2018 events transpired.
We're in 2020, and that's when we pick up the story because in May of 2022, $3.55 million was transferred into an account for EM. When did you first of all know about 2018? When did the CEO of Hockey Canada inform you about 2018?
Le conseil d'administration.
The board of directors in place in June 2018 when the events took place, and I was not the chair of that board, was informed towards the end of June of those events of an allegation of sexual assault.
So what did you do after you were informed, when you were on the board, when you came on the board? What was the procedure then of the board to move forward with 2018 allegations? What did you do? Your leadership.
Le leadership,
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Waugh, for your question. As soon as we were informed that the event had taken place, we were also informed that measures had been taken by the board. So, police officers of the London Police Service had been informed. The situation had been reported to them. We were informed that the board had also mandated a firm of legal experts to shed light on the truth and provide recommendations to Hockey Canada. And the board was also informed that our management had been in touch with the insurers and Sport Canada. That is the information that was shared when we were informed of the situation, which was at the end of June 2018.
Kevin, your time is up. I will go to Lisa Hepner for the Liberals for 5 minutes, please, Lisa.
Thank you very much, Chair. I would like to begin my questions with Ms. Skinner. In your opening statement, you said that this violence, toxic violence, is not a specific hockey problem. And yet, the stories we're hearing around Hockey Canada are different from the stories of abuse that we're hearing from other sports. And I'm wondering if you can comment on that. What we're hearing from Hockey Canada is more than one incident of athletes acting like a pack of hooligans. And I'm wondering, and we don't hear that from other athletes in other sports. I'm wondering if you can talk about the hockey culture and why you think we're hearing specific stories about hockey and not other sports.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the question. I think the whole topic of sexual assault is a difficult one. The allegations of group sexual assault I've heard in 2018 and 2003, and I actually am not aware of other incidents of that. So I do know, and when I referred to scapegoating in my opening statement, when I talk about that, I talk about sexual assault and the way we treat women as being a societal problem. It's a social issue. It's triggered by the environments we exist in. Just last week, there were 2 news stories about, politicians who've had allegations of sexual assault thrown at them. So in my view, any incident, no matter the type, is problematic. And so that's the point I was trying to make in my opening. I think we need to not just sit back and condemn hockey, but take a broader view of this and say, how can we fix this in every sport and everywhere?
Okay, so if that's the case, then do you see a problem with Hockey Canada condoning this behavior and even more than condoning the behavior when there's no consequences when these allegations come forward? There's no consequences to players. There's a fund that pays off the victim. And I know you talk about wanting to respect the victim, but respectfully, it sounds like a cop-out because the players walked away with no consequences. And so the behavior can continue because the top, Hockey Canada, is saying, we'll pay we'll make it go away, and the players can just continue, and no one will ever hear any further details. Do you understand why it looks to the general public like Hockey Canada is condoning that behavior?
Thank you for the question. I understand there is a perspective out there, and I do, with great respect, disagree with it. I think we want to see consequences for the players. The woman in this circumstance did not identify and refused to identify the players. So what Hockey Canada has done, we decided to resolve the matter in a way that was trauma-centered, victim-centered, or complainant-centered. And at the same time, we've got an investigation that's ongoing, and we put in a place so that players will have to participate in that investigation so that the truth can be discovered. If they are found to have violated the code of conduct, they will be held responsible. And that's a process that's ongoing. So I absolutely think that there needs to be accountability. I absolutely reject that we've condoned this. We took a view to try to respectfully deal with the wishes and perspectives of the woman. And I can point to a very recent example of exactly what we were trying to avoid by resolving this matter and not pushing it through the litigation process. And that's the story about Jake Virtanen, where he was charged with sexual assault. It recently, from an incident in 2017, in 2021 or 2022, the criminal trial resolved.
Okay, I'm sorry, we're getting it's a little off topic.
I'm sorry, I'm happy to save this for a different point, but I'm trying to illustrate this was not an attempt.
I'm
to
sorry, Ms. Skinner. The questioner has the right to tell you when she thinks you have answered or not answered. So, Ms. Epner.
Let me go to our other witness, Mr. Brindamore, and ask the same question, because both of you have said that Hockey Canada took appropriate action at the time, and yet now there's changes being made so that players have to participate in the action. So do you think that Hockey Canada from the top has been condoning this behavior by maintaining a fund in which players face no consequences for their actions?
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you to the member for her question. I do not understand the English term condoning, but what I can tell you
Dès le moment
is from the moment when the investigation by the law firm was able to resume, from that time it was clearly stated before this committee when Ms. Robitaille testified that the witness did not want to continue to hear players, Ms. Robitaille wanted to meet with the plaintiff and get her statement before continuing with the statement.
Gone way over her time, and I'm trying to be fair to everybody, so I'm allowing some leeway here. But I think we'll have to have you answer that question when another questioner comes up. So I'm going to go to Mr. Lemire.
Madame la Présidente.
Madam Chair, it's Ms. Larouche who will be asking the question. Mr. Brindamour, I heard your opening remarks, and I'm listening to your responses. When Mr. Smith came to the committee for the first time, we were all shocked around the table by the trivialization of the allegations of sexual assault. But it is serious, and to say to the committee that there are other sexual assailants elsewhere in society, well, we are all shocked by this trivialization. And today, the same is happening again. Earlier, you compared what happened at Hockey Canada with other cases elsewhere in the media, with violence elsewhere in society, but we are here to talk about the events at Hockey Canada. And yes, of course, other things happen in other sports. We've all heard tell of them. But we're here to talk about the 2018 allegations, and there have been other allegations. We've been told that at the committee as well, and there are other problems with Hockey Canada, other cases. So, Ms. Skinner, I would like to hear you comment on that, but you also did not answer another question. So we're talking about concern about the image. Now, what has been said in the media about the second fund you said is not true. Can you tell us what that fund was used for?
Sir, I heard a number of questions. I'm happy to start with the question about the legacy trust. So as I think I tried to explain, that trust was established to cover uninsured claims that might arise from the period when Hockey Canada and its members were self-insured. So for claims that might arise between September of 1986 and August of 1995. That's why there was money put into that trust.
Pourtant, ce qui a été rapporté est...
However, what was reported and what many are speaking out against and what did appear in the media is that these funds enabled and were there to protect sexual assault allegations. And it is this culture of silence and this way that you tried to sweep things under the rug instead of being clear and transparent. You could have been much more transparent to show that you were taking the allegations seriously and that Hockey Canada was taking steps to truly change its culture. But that is not what was done.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I fundamentally disagree with the way the trust has been characterized in the media. In terms of trivializing or sweeping aside, sexual assault allegations or other maltreatment, I can tell you that's absolutely not the case. We've done a number of things as a board since 2020. We've adopted a national template maltreatment policy, which we distributed to all of our members. In June of 2021, we started tracking incidents of maltreatment, including things like discriminatory taunts and insults under Rule 11.4, and we are tracking that so we can better understand where incidents of maltreatment are occurring. We were doing that long before this discussion took place around sexual assault. Just recently, we've created a new independent and confidential mechanism to investigate complaints. This will improve the handling, the Hockey Canada's handling of complaints when they do come forward. We also adopted an inclusive gender expression and gender identity policy that's going to benefit all of our participants, including transgender participants. We have been completely preoccupied with making the game safer, more inclusive for people, and for putting in place systems that will allow us, when these unfortunate incidents of maltreatment come forward, that will allow us to better respond to them.
Mais maintenant, le suivi de tout ça.
Now, to follow up on all of that, something else that is concerning people. You talked about policies, but when we keep looking into Hockey Canada, more and more allegations come to the surface. So how can you assure us that a culture change can happen with the people in charge? Because the people in charge are also important when a culture change happens, but these people have trivialized these events and they put more effort into protecting their own image than promoting a safe environment. So how can you seriously believe that you can accomplish the necessary change by keeping the same people in power?
Ms. Narush, I think that your time is well over, so I'm going to go to Mr. Julian. Mr. Julian, you actually got 5 minutes, Ms. LaRouche, and you really only should have had 2.5. But there you go. So, Mr. Julian, I'm going to give you 5 minutes as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think it's fair to say that the lack of financial transparency around these issues of allegations of sexual abuse and sexual violence is very disturbing. I'm calling on the Minister of Sport to do a full audit of Hockey Canada going back to 2016. I think that is one way that Canadian parents and the Canadian public can get answers to these important questions. I want to come back, Ms. Skinner, to Mr. Smith's testimony for July 27th, when I asked him about, for victims who wanted to come forward, if Hockey Canada would release them from the non-disclosure agreements. And Mr. Smith said, and I quote, "For victims who will come forward, first and foremost, we want to make sure they have confidence but we will continue to work to document their wishes. If they wish to eliminate those, that means the non-disclosure agreements. Unless there is a legal reason not to that I'm not aware of, I'm not sure why we wouldn't. Our priority is to support the victims. Ms. Skinner, has the board taken that decision to release the victims that choose to from their non-disclosure agreements?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. Apologies, it took me a minute to find my mute button. We've not been asked that question, sir.
So the board has not had any follow-up at all. We had Mr. Scott Smith in public testimony after being sworn in saying that he would endeavor to do that, and the board has not even now, 2 months later, looked into that issue of non-disclosure agreements. There's been no discussion at the board at all?
Sir, there has been discussion about non-disclosure agreements in a general sense, not in relation to any particular matter. Every circumstance is unique, and often the non-disclosure agreement is put in at the request of the complainant or the victim. And so, if a request were to come forward, we would absolutely consider it and deal with it.
But there's been no discussion of that at the board level, even though it was very clear that Hockey, at least in testimony here, that Hockey Canada would be open to that. Is the message you're sending to victims today that Hockey Canada will allow them to be released from their non-disclosure agreement? Is that the message that you are giving to the Canadian public and to the victims today?
Well, my message is that every case has its own unique set of circumstances and facts, and if an individual who is the subject of a non-disclosure agreement wishes to come forward and to be released from that, I would invite them to come forward and make that request, and we'll deal with it when it's made.
That is different than what he said on July 27th. Do you understand the contradiction between saying...
I'm sorry, I don't recall that testimony, so I'm not trying to be difficult. I don't recall that from Mr. Smith, and I don't have his transcript.
I think the message from Hockey Canada on July 27th was that they're open. Now you're saying that Hockey Canada will consider it, which doesn't appear open at all. And I regret that. I would have preferred a message from you as chair of the board saying to victims that Hockey Canada will release them from non-disclosure agreements if they so choose. I'll move on.
Yeah, I'm happy to respond to that. I don't think we're saying anything different. We want to be open, and we certainly are taking a a complainant-centric approach, and that's why we handled the 2018 incident the way that we did. So I don't disagree with what you said, sir.
So your message today to the victims is if they choose or if they want to be released from the non-disclosure agreement, Hockey Canada will allow that?
Hockey Canada will consider it with a view to allowing it unless there's a good reason not to.
There were no requests made on August 2nd at the Hockey Canada board around non-disclosure agreements?
I believe there's been one request around a non-disclosure agreement related to a former board member and his involvement in the board, and that is still something that the board is gathering more information on. It's not an incident related to sexual assault.
Ms. Skinner, I've got the Appendix 1 from the Hockey Canada board agenda for August 2nd, 2022. It says non-disclosure agreement to request for removal of signed NDAs.
So I stand corrected. There were two requests in relation to the same incident that happened at a board level. Again, it was investigated by an independent party, as I understand it. This was a board well before my time, and again, as I understand it, has nothing to do with sexual assault.
Did the board release
Peter,
that individual from the NDA?
Peter, we're going to have to leave that one on the table, and you can ask it again. But I want to apologize to the committee for allowing both Peter and Ms. LaRoche for going to 5 minutes. But this is so fascinating, the testimony, that I get lost in listening to it and listening to what I consider sometimes to be absolutely contradiction in the testimony. Anyway, we'll move on, and I will go to Ms. Thomas for 5 minutes, please, Ms. Thomas.
Thank you. so far what we've heard is we heard Mr. Brindamore, and he said that he stepped back from being chair of the board because there is much to do and much that needs to be accomplished, and he wanted to see that. We've heard from Ms. Skinner. She said that there will be no more changes to leadership at this time because the organization needs to remain stable, and therefore it will continue as status quo. So I'm curious as to which one it is then. Ms. Skinner, in your view, should Hockey Canada then be most interested in maintaining stability, or should Hockey Canada be interested in creating cultural change?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that Hockey Canada can do both. I think the cultural change has already started with my presence on the board, starting in November 2020. I think it's been accelerated. I think stability is an important consideration, especially in view of the fact that we have an entire board that's up for election in just a couple of months' time. And I don't think it's in the best interest of hockey or Hockey Canada for this organization to be destroyed. I don't think that a mass exit, if all the board were to resign and if all of senior management to be replaced, who would they be replaced with? What will that mean for hockey? How will that impact the boys and girls?
Let me be a little bit more specific then. Every leading voice having to do with organizational change would say that the way to produce a desired culture is actually to start with the leader. Now, you seem to be very insistent that this leader needs to be protected, that he should be kept in place, and that somehow organizational change or a culture shift is still possible. And you're saying that that actually starts with you. You just said that you're a very instrumental piece in that change, but you don't seem to be open to changing the culture by starting with the leader. So what I'm hearing then from you and Hockey Canada then is that there's these words that are being nuanced, there's these platitudes that are being made in order to try to pacify the public, whether that be the public at large or players or parents. But I'm not actually seeing meaningful structures being put in place in order to generate the change that is needed in order to create a Hockey Canada that we as Canadians can be proud of, that players can join, that parents can be part of, and know that the players are going to be in the best care possible. I'm just curious, why is the leader of this organization being protected rather than being held accountable?
Madam Chair, the leader is not being protected. Management is independent from the Board of Hockey Canada. Those lines are clear.
Ms. Skinner, with all due respect, is it not the responsibility of the board to determine whether or not the leader of Hockey Canada stays?
Absolutely, it is, but that's not a measure of protection.
I just wanted to make sure that was clear. So it is your decision then as chair, it is your responsibility to lead the board in its decision-making process and to determine whether or not the leader of Hockey Canada stays or goes. Is that correct?
It is the board's decision to determine the employment of the chief executive officer. That's correct.
Absolutely, thank you. And you've decided, contrary to all of the literature out there, all of the research that has been done that would say start with the leader, and you have said, no, we are going to protect the leader, we are going to keep the leader, and somehow magically still change culture. Is that correct?
No, I'm sorry. Respectfully, I disagree with that. We've not said we were going to protect the CEO and somehow magically change the culture. We have been working very hard over the past 2 years to put in place systems, and I mentioned the policies that were recently passed. Just last week, a new discipline and complaints policy, our independent third-party mechanism was adopted. The board carefully evaluates and considers whether we have the appropriate people in place based on all of the information. We have done that.
Ms. Skinner, I'm down to time here. Can you just outline for us and for Canadians, more importantly, what are the 3 top qualities that Scott presents that make him the most effective leader to bring Hockey Canada through this instrumental change? The 3 top qualities that make him the best leader for this.
That's a question that
Madam Chair,
that I would have liked to have some
surely your board has discussed this. What makes him the best leader?
what makes the CEO and his management team is a good leader is, first of all, he's got an excellent team in place that is enabling us to be able to make significant change. And I appreciate that some may disagree or may not have that perspective, but I believe we are making significant change for the organization under that leadership. We also need someone who is fully dedicated and aligned with the strategic plan, and Mr. Smith is.
Thank you, Ms. Skinner. I don't believe you answered the question, though. I think we will now move for the Liberals, Chris Biddle, for 5 minutes, Chris.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I guess just a question out of curiosity. I'm a civil litigator by trade, and when I'm in court, I watch witnesses and what they're doing, and you don't seem to be looking at the camera when you're answering the question. So, Ms. Skinner, is someone typing answers to you or providing answers to you? I know we said counsel could assist, but is there someone providing you answers?
Well, as the committee is aware, Mr. Winton is in the room with me, but I have papers spread out all around me. I'm also, my practice is also litigation-based, so as you know, my style is to have papers spread literally all around the desk, and I did make some notes. I had very little time to prepare for this hearing, so I made some notes. And so it's my words that are coming from my mouth, sir.
Fair enough. Monsieur Brindamore, the same question.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Answer, Mr. Brindamore. Before you answer, I would like to point out that at the beginning, this committee made it very clear that you are appearing as an independent and that therefore you should not have counsel giving you any answers at all. So I hope you're keeping true to that, which you promised that you would do. Thank you. But please answer the question.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Biddle, for your question. Much as my colleague Ms. Skinner said, I have papers around me. I also had little time, and I am working based on my notes. That's all. I'm not receiving any messages.
A follow-up question for you, and I was kind of shocked. Mr. Nader and Mr. Housefather asked you a direct question multiple times. And I guess I was shocked when I looked you up to find that you're a litigator yourself. And I'm not going to ask the question again, but I would expect as a member of the Quebec Bar and as a witness under subpoena, why do you think you don't need to answer a direct question from elected members of Parliament under oath? And is that a sign? You may have contempt for this proceeding, but is that really a sign of the leadership at Hockey Canada and the leadership that you provided?
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you to the member for your question. I believe I answered the question that was put to me. And the way that I answered it.
You were asked a yes or no question, and I think if from your bio you were you're a litigator of 40 years, I don't think you would accept a witness who claimed to answer a question that was yes or no. So I don't know why you would why are you applying a different standard to your testimony as a witness that you would never have accepted as a lawyer in a courtroom?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the member. This forum in no way resembles a court of justice, but I'm answering the questions that are asked to me.
You're a witness under subpoena, under oath, and I know there isn't a judge in front of you, but I guess this is shocking, and it really speaks to, again, how Hockey Canada and its leadership views this proceeding and how it's taken part in past actions. It's truly troubling that you would dismiss us. We have the same powers as a court. We brought you here under summons, and this is truly disappointing. Ms. Skinner, in your opening statement, I was particularly shocked when you thought Hockey Canada was being a scapegoat in this proceeding, and it seems to dismiss some of the responsibility that you have as a board, especially when you bring in suggestions of, you said, well, a politician recently was found to have engaged in sexual assault, which is true, but I believe that member was kicked out of the Conservative caucus. There were consequences for that. Mr. Nader's nodding in agreement. So there are consequences for that. The Senate moved to have that member expelled from the Senate, and now there are charges laid against him. So why are you using that as an example? Because there were consequences to this politician where the players and leaders involved in what happened at Hockey Canada seemed to have no consequences. So can you help me, I guess, square the circle in terms of...
For sure.
Yeah, thank you.
For sure. So I gave that example of the politicians just as the first example that came to mind when I was asked a question. So it was a response to a question, and just happens to be what I read in the media recently. This it certainly is Hockey Canada's hope, and it's my hope that the players will be held accountable in this case, so that to the extent that there's culpable conduct, they will be held accountable for that, and that's the investigation process that's ongoing that this committee's heard about.
Mr. Biddle, I think you've just gone over 5 minutes, but I've been very lenient today. So thank you very much. And now we're going to the third round, sorry. And for the Conservatives, for 5 minutes, Mr. Martel.
Merci, Madame la...
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madame Skinner, oui.
Ms. Skinner, my question is for you. How are you going to have Hockey Canada function without sponsors, without federal funds, if you keep all leaders in power? How will you operate Hockey Canada without these sponsors?
Thank you. I believe the sponsors, and I've been meeting with many of them, I believe the sponsors are on pause as they have a little bit of patience and give us a little bit of time to put in place and follow through on our action plan, the governance review, the board elections, which will inevitably result in leadership change. So I'm very hopeful that the sponsors who've been good partners to Hockey Canada and frankly for all of the boys and girls who are playing hockey, I'm hopeful that they'll continue to have patience while we continue to re-earn the trust of Canadians and sponsors alike.
Si vous gardez les mêmes gens autour...
If you keep the same people around the table, do you truly believe that sponsors' trust will come back just like that with everything that happened and with everything that we've heard about? In your opinion, do you think that can happen even though trust has been so shaken to Hockey Canada?
Madam Chair, my honest answer is I had hoped that, in taking on this interim role, that I could help provide a different perspective and provide some different information than I think some people have understood on some of these things, like the 2018 settlement, the settlement with respect to the 2018 allegations. There will be leadership change, as I said. All 9 board positions are up for election in just a couple of months' time.
Si vous avez l'air vraiment à tenir à ce que...
You seem to really insist that people should stay in their posts. Are you afraid of change? Are you afraid of bringing new people on board? It seems you want to keep people in place.
I absolutely am not afraid of change. I welcome it. I believe that we have changed. We're continuing to change. I go back to a comment I was making earlier, which is I think that there is a significant risk to the organization if all of the board resigns and all of senior leadership is no longer there. I think that will be very impactful in a negative way to our boys and girls who are playing hockey. Will the lights stay on the rink? I don't know. We can't predict that, and to me, that's not a risk worth taking. And that's why I stepped into this role.
Alors, ce que je comprends...
So what I'm understanding is that you're not working to bring in a new generation of leaders. So you're not working to prepare a new generation?
Sir, I am the new generation. I'm the first female chair of Hockey Canada. I sit on a board that in November 2020 elected 3 women. Unfortunately, one of them well, fortunately for her, she was elevated to sit as a judge. But I am part of the change. That's why I'm here. And there is an election coming up, and I would encourage anyone who thinks that they can contribute to this organization in a positive way to apply and to make the game better. I absolutely believe that.
Combien qu'il y a d'enquêtes présentement?
How many investigations are currently ongoing at Hockey Canada?
There are, as I understand it, there are 3 investigations that are ongoing that have been reported to Sport Canada.
Parce que M. Smith nous a...
Because Mr. Smith very clearly told us that there were 1 to 2 cases per year. Isn't that correct?
I'm sorry, I can't recall what Mr. Smith said. I know that there are 3 open incidences with Sport Canada. There are, and so if those are the investigations you're referring to, I believe there are 3.
Monsieur Brindamour.
Mr. Brindamour, how can you explain that you are the only person to have honorably stepped down and that to this date no one else has stepped down? How can you explain that? Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to the member for your question. As I stated earlier, this is a question regarding each member's own personal choice. I cannot give you any information regarding other individuals.
Sorry.
Combien j'ai?
How much time do I have left?
You
Une
don't
dernière
have,
question?
you've
Une dernière?
Can I ask one last question?
sorry. Sorry. All right, and now I go for the Liberals, Mr. Housefather, 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I would appreciate very succinct answers. When I ask a yes or no question, I'd like a yes or no answer, please. At your board meeting of August the 2nd, under item 4, it says Scott provided an update on the following items: review of settlements since 2000 and circumstances with each. Was there a written document provided to the board? Ms. Skinner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, there was not, to the member.
Was there anything given to the board that Mr. Smith used? Did Mr. Smith, for example, refer to any notes of his as he was explaining all of the actions since 2000 and all of the settlements?
I'm not aware what Mr. Smith used to prepare.
Fine. I think, Madam Chair, we'll have to ask for that document. Let me come back to the administrative practices of Hockey Canada. One of the reasons the committee is having some trouble today is the minutes that we did receive arrived yesterday, translated. It was sent by Hockey Canada on September the 30th, and that was a bundle of minutes. And we didn't receive the other request that we had, which was for director's notes from in-camera meetings before you started minuting them. So let me just ask this question. Hockey Canada, like most good corporate organizations, has historically, since we have minutes going back years, approved the minutes of its meetings at the next regularly scheduled board meeting. There were meetings held April 28th to the 30th and May the 7th that would normally have been approved at the June 2nd meeting. It was on the agenda for the June 2nd meeting. Ms. Skinner, why were the board minutes not approved on June 2nd?
Well, thank you, and Madam Chair, through you. The minutes were not complete, so they were unable to be approved. Hockey Canada, the staff that helps with preparing an initial draft of the minutes, was inundated with requests in terms of responding to documents that Mr. Cromwell was requesting for his review. So there was a delay in the minutes being prepared for the board's review. In terms of the September 30th
So it had nothing whatsoever to do with the House of Commons adopting a motion that day to ask this committee to review Hockey Canada and the knowledge that those minutes would eventually be subpoenaed. And then those minutes were not approved until either September 8th or September the 28th. Ms. Skinner, why were the minutes that were approved on September the 8th not delivered to this committee before September 30th?
My understanding is that the request by this committee was that the minutes be provided by September 30th, and they were, with the exception of I think some that were sent either yesterday or this morning. And
there was an ongoing order to provide the minutes as they were approved, and the delay in approving the minutes makes it seem you didn't want us to have the minutes for our meetings in June, July, and that we would get them at the last minute today, which is why we had to summon the unapproved minutes. So let me just ask the question. When you dealt with the settlement agreement, And Mr. Brindamore mentioned that it happened at a meeting on May the 19th. Where is this minuted? Where is the minuting of the board approving anything to do with the settlement agreement?
Well, sir, and thank you, Madam Chair. That discussion, the discussion on May 19th that Mr. Brindamore referred to, occurred in camera. And as you know, it's not required to take minutes of discussions that happen in camera.
But when a board, you're a lawyer, Ms. Skinner, you're a lawyer.
Sorry,
when a board approves something, when a board approves and authorizes somebody to sign a settlement agreement, when a board authorizes an amount to be paid in a settlement, yes, the normal practice would be to come out of camera and minute that. That wasn't minuted. You're an attorney. Would you ever advise the client to not minute something so they can never prove in the future what decision was made at a board meeting?
Sir, I wasn't the chair at that time. I certainly, when I took on this role, I did create a document. It's been provided to the committee of a record of all of the in-camera meetings that Hockey Canada had. And I noted that in that document, which is a record-keeping document, that the decision was made to authorize a maximum amount of settlement and for external counsel to proceed with negotiations with the young woman. So we certainly, I'm not going to stand here and say, that our practices were perfect. Yes, we can absolutely improve in our minute taking, and I've tried to put that in process, and I'm hopeful that through the governance review we'll get some even more guidance.
I appreciate that you've changed the practice and now you're minuting in camera meetings and you've engaged somebody, a lawyer, to assist with governance. That's excellent. Let me ask the question: did the board have the proposed settlement agreement in front of it when it authorized the settlement? Did the board members read the proposed settlement agreement, including the non-disclosure terms, before the board authorized settlement?
30 seconds.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sir, we received advice from external counsel, and we provided authorization as a board.
Without reading the agreement, without actually having an agreement in front of you to approve, would you ever tell a client to sign an agreement without having actually reviewed it? Because that's what the board seems to have done here. Let me also understand, the Hockey Canada's officials came here and said you had no idea what underlying circumstances were involved with this incident. How did you make the determination that legally you should settle?
We relied on the advice of external counsel.
I'm sorry, your time is up.
Thank you, Madam
and
Chair.
I would appreciate that question being answered, though.
Thank you.
Ms. Skinner, just simply yes or no. Mr. Housefather asked you, would you approve that if you had a client? Could you give us a yes or no answer, please?
I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I need to hear the question again. To me, it wasn't a yes or no question. We relied on external legal counsel with respect to documenting the negotiating and then documenting the settlement.
We will move on then, but I really wish that people would answer the questions. Thank you. Mr. Lemire, 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci, Madame la...
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Skinner, the check that EM would have received had which logo on it?
I have not seen the check, sir. That's an operational matter.
Là provient exclusivement de Hockey Canada?
Does that money come exclusively from Hockey Canada?
Yes, it came from Hockey Canada. I'm sorry if I...
Parce que vous avez dit à mon collègue...
Because you told my colleague that how can you explain a fund that has been split 50-50 with Hockey Canada for a number of years? We saw by an Alberta court that there is a second fund in place that is used, among other things, to cover sexual assault allegations, the risk management fund. Are we going to see the amount of money that is paid? Can you confirm if money came from different funds to pay out victims, and including from other incidents as well?
I think to give you the best and most accurate information, sir, and through you, Madam Chair, that would be an appropriate question for operations. My understanding is the second fund that you refer to has never been used to cover to pay out or to settle a claim. That's the Participant Legacy Trust Fund.
Vous avez créé des fonds.
You created risk management funds to pay out different amounts, and now there is a culture, including the fact that there are contractual clauses regarding sport inclusivity and minimum wages for players, did you also create funds regarding these different court proceedings?
I apologize. I think I may not have caught up with the translation. So would it be possible to repeat the question?
Est-ce que vous me permettez d'avoir...
May I have 30 seconds added to my time, Madam Chair? Essentially, is it the insurance strategy or the fund that was put in place to be able to settle different cases? And did you discuss with the board different collective lawsuits regarding sexual assault?
I'm not quite sure I understand the question. There are lawsuits that are ongoing, and a number of those are being handled through Hockey Canada's insurer.
Thank you very much. I have given you the extra time, Mr. Lemire, and so we're ready to move on to Mr. Julian for 2.5 minutes, please, Peter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The refusal to provide information, for example, around the cost of Navigator is disturbing. And I believe we need to come back to the issue of the non-disclosure agreements. I wanted to ask Ms. Skinner, for the August 2nd meeting, was the release from the non-disclosure agreements approved? And how many non-disclosure agreements have been basically allowed the victims or the signatories to the NDAs? How many have Hockey Canada allowed in the past year to be released?
I don't know the answer to that second question. I'm not aware of any, except I am aware of the release with respect to the 2018 settlement that the woman was released from the NDA in that context. With respect to the August 2nd consideration, my recollection is, and I don't have the pinpoint in the minutes right now, but that the board requested further information around the request for that for the release of the NDA, who it might affect, and whether those people might be resistant to the release of the NDA. Because as you know, in legal proceedings or semi-legal proceedings, NDAs are often put in place for the benefit of more than one party.
Thank you. I would appreciate you providing that information to the committee, as well as the cost of Navigator Public Relations, if you could provide that to the committee as well. I want to come
Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt, sir. Just so I'm clear, what's the request?
The cost for Navigator, the cost
yes.
of how much Hockey Canada is spending for their public relations firm. Now, I'll move on to the Hockey Canada board minutes for the end of April. There was discussion around renewal of the Directors and Officers Liability Insurance Program. In that discussion, I understand that it was this was a deadline of September 2022. Was there discussion of the 2018, the horrific allegations coming out of 2018, and the horrific allegations that we've seen coming out of 2003?
I don't believe so. I was ill for one of the days of that board meeting in April, but I don't believe that there was. At least not while I was in attendance.
Has there been discussion of the 2003 allegations at any board meeting over the last few months?
There would have been discussion in the context of an update from Scott Smith, which I think one of your colleagues referred me to, just to report that an investigation was ongoing.
That's it. Thank you. Peter, you've gone over time. I'm sorry. So we will now go to the Conservatives, 5 minutes. Mr. Martel and Mr. Nader, you're going to split your time. All right. Who will begin first? Mr. Martel.
Thank you. Mr. Brindamour, as a lawyer who worked in youth protection, is your experience in youth? Is that something that led you to step down?
Monsieur
Comme,
Brindamont. Monsieur Brindamont.
oui, Madame,
Madam Chair. Madam Chair, and thank you to the member for your question. Look, the fact that I worked in youth tribunals was not a factor in my decision to step down from my tasks. No. No, Mr. Martel.
Surpris que vous êtes là.
Are you surprised that you were the only one to have stepped down? I find it difficult to believe. I would like to know what you think of that. Are you surprised?
comme je pense que
Madam Chair, thank you. And thank you to the member for your question. Look, as I said, these are personal decisions. Each individual has their own ideas about how they can contribute to the advancement of change. Unfortunately, you're asking me to oppose other individuals, but my personal opinion doesn't matter so much because it doesn't have as much value, so that is the best I can answer. Ms. Skinner, I would like to come back to the fact that you said you will keep Mr. Scott in place. Why do you think he should remain in his post?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I said in one of my previous comments, I don't believe that senior management acted improperly or took inappropriate steps. I believe that they handled the 2018 incident appropriately in terms of the steps they took, contacting the police, retaining an independent law firm to investigate the allegations, and contacting Sport Canada. So in my view, as I said, particularly being mindful of all 9 board positions being up for election later this year, and the fact that we are waiting for the results of a comprehensive governance review, we think that the people that we have in place are the people who are moving forward our action plan, and we're making significant progress on that. And that change is happening right before our eyes with the current board and leadership.
Madame.
Martel, your 2.5 minutes is up. So do you want John to go on now? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Brindamore, one last time, do you have confidence in Scott Smith to lead this organization?
Madame la Présidente.
Madam Chair, thank you to the member for your question. Mr. Nader, it is not my decision to make. You're asking my personal opinion, and...
Could you please direct the witness to answer the question?
Please answer the question, Mr. Brindamore.
Je crois que Monsieur Smith.
I believe that Mr. Smith has the necessary qualities to be able to do something positive for the organization. He's someone who brings people together. He knows how to surround himself with a team that complements his own skills. He's a hard worker.
Question, do you have confidence in Mr. Smith to lead this organization?
Oui.
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Skinner, would you be in favor of directing all provincial branches to disclose to this committee information they have about historical abuse claims, including who investigated them and which funds were used to settle claims at each of the provincial organizations?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Respectfully, I think that information should be directed to the independent third-party mechanism, who is fully equipped to be able to review and report on those claims.
With respect, Ms. Skinner, what we've seen from the independent investigator in the past is hiding behind solicitor-client privilege. In a sense, Hockey Canada is using solicitor-client privilege to hide third-party investigations. So I'm asking you whether you, as chair of this board, as an effort to see meaningful change, whether these historical claims at the provincial level ought to be provided to this committee.
I would have to think about that, sir, and through you, Madam Chair, I would have significant concerns about privacy. I think that the young woman involved at the center of the 2018 incident, I think unfortunately this has been a much more public process than she would have envisioned, and so I'd want to think carefully about the ramifications of what you've proposed from a complainant's or victim's right perspective and from a privacy perspective.
Time is up, and I would like to go to Mr. Housefather for the Liberals for 5 minutes, please, Mr. Housefather.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Just to come back, and this is just my personal thoughts. You're saying that the board acted coherently and competently when it decided to settle the 2018 claim, and I just find that odd. Number one, again, not minuted. Number two, the whole discussion about settling a claim revolves around the legal risk of Hockey Canada, and you have to understand the legal risk of Hockey Canada and your affiliates and the players in order to understand whether or not you settle a case. Yet we were told by Hockey Canada at repeated hearings they didn't know the identity of the individuals involved, and they didn't know whether the underlying facts were true. Meaning to me, then you would settle every single case if the position is you just settle the cases because you want to protect the plaintiff, whether you have investigated or not. And finally, it seems that you didn't even have the actual agreement in front of you when you're authorizing it. So in any case, I find it odd, and I just wanted to explain to you why I was so categorical in my previous round of questions. I want to move to another issue because you've talked about moving forward.
Sir,
you've talked about the
I'm
oversight
happy to
committee.
respond to that.
I didn't ask anything.
To respond to that.
I didn't ask anything.
Ms. Skinner,
Okay.
you were not asked to respond.
You've talked about how the Oversight Committee of Expert tasked with monitoring and providing guidance on Hockey Canada's plan to eliminate toxic behavior in the sport is something that is really important, and the Implementation Oversight Committee has been discussed a number of times by the board. Three-time Olympic gold medalist Marnie McBean alleged in August that she was asked by Navigator to sit on this committee. Was she asked to sit on this committee, Ms. Skinner?
According to the media reports, she was.
Okay.
Navigator, the board delegated the recruitment of the panel to a third party, and so I can't say exactly what discussions went on there, but I read the article as well.
Okay, and she alleged, as you know, that it was rescinded because she made it clear that top Hockey Canada officials needed to be removed, and that condition was not met. And then I go to the September 15th minutes, which says, on the Special Committee on Action Plan Implementation, Navigator have consulted with a number of individuals. However, for a variety of reasons provided, did not have success confirming 3 qualified independent individuals to agree to be on the Special Committee on Action Plan Implementation at this time, despite the fact that the action plan indicated a September 15th date for the appointment of the Special Committee. What were the variety of reasons provided that none of these people agreed to sit on the Oversight Committee?
Madam Chair, there were a number of reasons, and I'm afraid I'm not going to recollect all of them at the moment. But I think there were some individuals who were too busy, didn't have the time to be able to devote to it, were unable to come in with a purely independent slate, if I could put it that way. So there were a number of reasons.
Okay, so that's an interesting perspective. So none of the reasons that you offered related to any demands by these people of additional steps that Hockey Canada needed to take before they would agree to serve. Was that ever brought up as one of the reasons that people declined?
It may have been, and I think if it was, I mean, this oversight committee has a particular mandate, and again, I would encourage anyone who wants to make a difference in hockey to come forward in the way that they think makes sense for them. And I think for some of the people that were approached on this oversight committee, that's not the way that made sense for them. And so we continue to work to find an independent oversight committee with respect to our action plan. And in the meantime, it's moving forward, and we're making good progress on it.
Okay, well, that's good to know, although the September 15th date is missed. Let me ask one more question, coming back to something that Mr. Nader asked. You were asked whether you'd suggest that information be provided to this committee. Let me ask the question in a different way, because we can go to the members and ask them for that information and summons it. Do you know how many claims were made to members of Hockey Canada related to allegations of sexual assault or sexual abuse between 2000 and today?
I don't believe I do. And if I heard it once, I don't have it at my fingertips. So I'm sorry, sir, I don't know.
Okay, would Hockey Canada not, as an organization that is convening and actually manages as trustee of the other fund, would you not ask the organizations to report to you? Is there a process Hockey Canada to require member organizations to report to Hockey Canada these type of claims like today there is at Sports Canada for Hockey Canada?
We have, as I mentioned, I can't speak to historically what had happened, but as I mentioned, we've just approved a process that will require that, yes.
Thank you, ma'am.
House Father. And now I would like to tell the committee that we do have the ability to go a little over one, like 2 minutes over, but there you go. We can go to a final round, and it's going to be a shortened round. So it's going to be the Conservatives for 5, the Liberals for 5, and the NDP and the Bloc for 2.5. That gives us a 15-minute round. So beginning with the fourth round, we will go to the Conservatives, and I think we have Ms. Thomas and Mr. War who are sharing the time. Ms. Thomas.
Sure, thank you. My question for you, Ms. Skinner, is you commented and you said that there was, quote, confidential spaces that were being created for players to be able to come forward with complaints, or perhaps it's even others that would be able to come forward with complaints or concerns, and that there would be an investigation done. Now, what I'm being led to believe is that this process would be done internally, that there would not be an external organization or external accountability. This concerns me because it speaks of greater secrecy. Do you care to clarify?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The third party, the independent third party, is an independent third party. It's not internal. It's been completely outsourced, so it takes it out of Hockey Canada's hands completely.
How better?
Okay. Ms. Skinner, your term expires in 4 weeks. Will you come back onto the board, and will you lead this organization?
Can you please answer the question?
Yes, apologies. I was looking for the unmute button again. I would tell you, sir, and thank you, and through you, Madam Chair, I'm focused on carrying out the balance of my term. As long as I feel like I can be a positive voice for hockey and for change, I'm here. I don't know what my future plans are. I can tell you I joined the board to be part of meaningful and positive change and growth in hockey. I didn't expect to be involved in politics. In some ways, this is a bit of a defining moment for me. I didn't expect to be a lightning rod for extremists or receive, threatening and hostile emails. I came here to be positive. I'm spending time away from my kids and my family and my job. So the short answer is I don't know.
You're 4 weeks away from that. So 8 other board members, have you talked to your board? Who's coming back, who's not? You mentioned earlier you feel now is not the time for a complete whitewash of the board or even those that are in charge, like Scott Smith. So you must have thought about this. We're 4 weeks away from having a new board with Hockey Canada, and you're leading it. So you must have thought about this. Yes or no? Are you coming back in 4 weeks?
There is a call for nominations out right now, sir, and the deadline for members of the public, including members of the current board, to indicate whether they want to be part of the next board is October 28th, I believe. That information has been posted on Hockey Canada's website. So I'm taking this day by day right now, trying to do the best I can every day. I don't know what every other board member's plans are. I know some board members are termed out and they're unable to run again.
Okay, have you talked to Justice Thomas Cromwell? He's doing the governance structure. Have you had a conversation with him?
I have. Mr. Cromwell reached out to me, as I think he reached out to 50 or so other people, including board members, to have a discussion with me, yes.
And what was your opinion of the governance structure? There seems to be a lot of issues Canada-wide that Hockey Canada needs to change. The governance structure where it's the CEO telling the board what's going on rather than the board directing the CEO. Would you agree with that assumption?
I don't, sir. I don't agree with that. I do embrace the governance review that's being undertaken. Absolutely. I think it will only make the organization better. But I do think that there's a separation between board and management, and that is an important and fundamental piece of good governance. that we are actively trying to achieve right now.
So is this a report that will just go on the shelf and never open up again? Or when Cromwell does come forward with recommendations, will you endorse those recommendations?
It's hard to say. It's hard to say it's hard to say exactly what will happen with the recommendations. If we're talking about making bylaw changes to the organization, those bylaw changes may be recommended by Hockey Canada, by the Hockey Canada board, but they're actually made by our member organizations. So we are working to do whatever we can to put our members in the best position to be able to consider the comments in the report and to implement them.
Okay.
But it is a member decision.
Thank you.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Yes, John.
Just very briefly, in Ms. Skinner's testimony, she mentioned that she was the recipient of threatening emails, extremist emails, and inappropriate contact. I think, on behalf of the committee, I think we ought to condemn any inappropriate extremist emails or contact that's made with any member of or any witness before this committee, and unequivocally condemn that type of activity, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Nader. I think the whole committee shares that sentiment. Now, Ms. Thomas.
I believe it's Mr. Lewis.
Oh, have you finished your time? You still, no, it's gone over seven seconds now. Sorry about that. So I will go to the Liberals, Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for being here. Ms. Skinner, I'd like to get your thoughts about the appropriateness of the government stopping federal funding to Hockey Canada, and also your thoughts on corporate sponsors pulling their funding. What message did that send to you?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it sent a message of, the degree of importance that hockey plays amongst members of the public. And I think it's compelled Hockey Canada to be better at communicating and more transparent, and I view that as a positive thing.
Want to say for the record, then, this funding was pulled before the story came out about the newly revealed Participants Legacy Trust Fund, which Hockey Canada never mentioned. That's something that didn't come up in previous testimony. Do you see that perception, that loss of confidence?
I understand. I understand that there is that perception out there. And again, as a parent with 2 young kids, I understand a concern about where are our funds going, where's our money going. That Participant Legacy Trust Fund has been fundamentally misconstrued, and I've tried to address that in my comments today.
Okay, well, and it's you mentioned our children, and that's primarily why we're here. We're looking out for our children in our communities. It's apparent from the testimony and in previous testimony that the perception is that we as a committee, journalists, Canadian public, we all have to pull this information out in an extraordinary way. Testimony from you, journalists digging for the truth. The message is somehow being sent that it's our responsibility to keep digging until we get to this truth. How can I go back to my community? How can we all go back to our communities? Let the people know, the parents know, that it's safe for them to enroll their children in hockey, and that part of their hard-earned money that they've been paying for their children to participate in sports seems to have been used to pay off sexual assault cases.
Madam Chair, I think you can commend them to my transcript of this proceeding. I think that there is messaging on our website, including messaging that I drafted, that seeks to reassure parents out there in particular that some of the information that they understand may not be the truth. And so I think this continues to be the game that many of us have grown up and loved, and we're trying to make it better, and we're working hard to do that. And we've got an open line of communication with members of the public, our members, with our sponsors. As I mentioned, we've been having town halls and focus groups. We're moving forward in a positive direction.
Okay, thank you. I'm not sure that today's testimony has instilled that confidence, but I would like to give the rest of my time to Mr. Housefather.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lewis. Ms. Skinner, if you were a teacher as opposed to a lawyer and you were grading Mr. Smith, would you give him, what grade from an A to an F would you give him in his role at Hockey Canada right now?
I'm a hard marker, and I think that that the circumstances in which Mr. Smith has been working have been really extraordinary and difficult. I would say that he's conducting himself as an A in the circumstances.
Well, you watched his testimony before this committee on 2 occasions. How would you grade him on his testimony before this committee? Would you say that was also an A?
I think Mr. Smith did the best that he could. He was as honest as he could be. I don't have a particular comment on that beyond saying that it's a difficult position to be put in. I know as I'm sitting here today.
Difficult position for sure, as you are in right now. The one thing I would say is I think this shows that there's a clear discrepancy between how the leadership of Hockey Canada views the management of Hockey Canada and how this committee of all parties and the Canadian public views the leadership of Hockey Canada. And that, I think, is diagnosing the real problem we have before us today, where I don't think you will win back the favor of Canadians and get parents to feel confident about Hockey Canada or participants to feel confident in Hockey Canada until, as Ms. Thomas rightly said, look at the leader and excise that leader. And I think you're missing that right now. But I thank you so much for your testimony today, Ms. Skinner.
Yeah, my pleasure. And I would just say I think we have been going around speaking to the public, and I don't know whether the public shares this committee's view or not. I just don't know.
Mr. Housefather.
Oh, I didn't think so, Madam Chair. And I'd like to make sure that my NDP and Bloc colleagues do have their time. Oh.
I'm keeping my eye on that, but if you finish, thank you.
Oh.
That's great. And now I will go to Mr. Lemire for 2.5 minutes. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Skinner, in the minutes, you mentioned the importance of keeping Hockey Canada coverage in the media under your impact. So why are players covered by your insurance policies?
Hockey Canada provides insurance for all participants participating in Hockey Canada programming and its members' programming.
Est-ce qu'ils payent des cotisations?
Do they pay into insurance?
Pardon me? I'm sorry, I didn't catch the
Est-ce qu'ils payent des cotisations?
Do they pay into insurance to benefit from insurance coverage if there is an incident or an event?
Apologies, Madam Chair. Yes, they do. $23.80 is paid by participants. About $3 of that goes to registration fees, and the balance goes to insurance fees.
Ça, c'est vrai pour l'ensemble des parties.
Is that true for all participants for Hockey Canada? Or rather, it is, but do players in the leagues pay into insurance in the same way?
I'm sorry, players or their parents, yes, they pay an insurance fee to Hockey Canada through their member organization.
On va faire nos vérifications. Je vais profiter de la minute.
I'll use the remaining minute. You said that you fundamentally disagree with the way in which we're talking about Hockey Canada in the media. I think that you're in a bubble and you're disconnected from the public. You're agreeing amongst yourselves that the proper action was taken. You are supposed to be the watchdogs of senior management, but you are contributing to maintaining toxic culture. You don't understand that it's up to you to properly communicate your message. You are accusing us as elected members and the media. We are waiting for the next allegations and incidents to come to light for us to be scandalized once again. Your role should have been to manage safe national sport for our enfants. Thank you for being with us today, nevertheless.
Thank you, Mr. Lemire. And I will go now to Mr. Julian for 2.5 minutes. Peter?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Skinner, for the issue of implementation, you're talking about a plan of action and implementation. Hockey Canada, under its current leadership, has had a very poor track record of implementing, whether we're talking about anti-sexual sexual abuse recommendations, anti-racism tracking. None of those have been implemented. And Danielle Robitaille testified on July 26 before this committee that her interim report that was provided in the wake of the horrific allegations of the 2018 sexual violence, that those recommendations had not been implemented. I asked her, and she said there were recommendations around alcohol that were implemented. That is, of course, the issue of underage drinking that Hockey Canada should never have condoned in the first place. Why have these reports, why have these recommendations not been implemented by Hockey Canada?
The recommendations have been implemented, so I believe Ms. Robitaille was incorrect when she made that comment. She simply may not have known, so I certainly don't fault her for that, but the recommendations have been implemented.
Okay, will you provide to this committee the interim report, and will you provide as well the balance in the funds currently both for the National Equity Fund and for the Participant Legacy Trust Fund?
The balance, the committee has been provided with the recommendations from the interim report. It is subject to solicitor-client privilege, so I don't believe that's something that we've provided at this point.
Yes, and that's why I'm asking, as board chair, will you commit to provide that to the committee?
I'm happy to give it some further thought. I'm concerned that it could affect the integrity of the ongoing investigation and the work that Heenan Hutchinson is doing. So at this point, my answer is no. In terms of the balances of the funds, I'm sure that we can provide that information to you.
There is very clearly a disconnect here between the Canadian public, Canadian parents who are asking for more transparency from Hockey Canada, and the Hockey Canada leadership. And I regret that that is something that has not permeated the organization. It's not through public relations. It's through concrete transparency and taking responsibility that Hockey Canada can regain the confidence of the Canadian public. It's our national winter sport. It's a very important sport. This is a very important organization. I've been profoundly disappointed by the lack of transparency for Hockey Canada now at 3 hearings since June, where the answers have just not been forthcoming and the transparency has not been present. And I believe Hockey Canada can do much better for hockey parents and for the Canadian public.
Thank you, Mr. Julian. And before I end this session, I would just like to make a comment as a chair. I have heard questions being asked. I have not heard a lot of the answers being given. I still feel distressed and disturbed to some extent that there doesn't seem amongst the witnesses to be a sense of accountability, to be rational and reasonable about what everyone is deeming to be a culture. I know we're only dealing with 2018 incident, but that incident does not stand alone. We have heard that since 2003, this has been the thing, sweeping under the rug, helping somebody to walk away, giving them payment, and leaving it at that. Those are profoundly disturbing things. And so for me, that means there's a culture. And I am really quite distressed to hear that everyone believes that the current leadership that have been at the helm since all of this has been happening should be kept because it is a grade A team. And so I just wanted to place that on the table because I don't believe that we have come to any kind of conclusions from these because we have not had any kind of sense of responsibility. Blaming everyone else does not mean that there's a sense of accountability. So with that having been said and letting my distress be known, I would like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved. Meeting's adjourned.